Hey everybody, it's NW Smith. So I want to get right into this. I found this probably back in 2011. This came out in 2003. Um, Once again, it was in that time frame when I was into studying other stuff besides us. I go back to this a lot when I'm talking about symbols to people. This guy, he's a hit and miss in my opinion when it comes to a lot of things. His work is good when it comes to the symbols and occults and how you figure out what you're really looking at. There's other stuff he talks about that's for me, it's it's not nowhere near what we've got. You know what I'm saying, as far as the comprehension we've got on things. He confuses the Old Testament and the New Testament with being one and the same a lot. Like he'll go to quote the Bible's wrong, and then he'll bring up something in the New Testament and refer to something in the New Testament but show a verse in the Old Testament trying to prove his point. He'll talk about symbolisms and stuff like that, and he talks about the woman is God and things like that, which I sat and after he talked about it and I thought about what he was saying, talking about how men are actually jealous because we can't give birth, and that's something that man's always wanted to do. I'm just saying, as a male myself, I never thought about, I'm jealous of a woman for giving birth. I'm always like, that looks painful. Ouch. I'm glad I'm not a woman. So, like I said, there's some things that when it comes to that stuff, I'm just like, use my discernment and I leave it at that, because if you ask me, I think that they downgrade a man when they always do that, because they always say, oh, women give birth, women give life, but here's the thing: without the male's seed, in my opinion, you gotta. This is how I look at it. Without the male seed, she can't bring forth that child out of her birth canal. Like the life is in what he gives her. You see what I'm saying? Like, her body is built to be the way it is, so she can produce, so she can, be the engineer that brings forth the living child. But its use is not the what it could be or should be if she does not have the seed, which in my opinion holds the life. But it's just so we differ when it comes to stuff. But I really wanted to show you what he does with the symbols.
Ancient Gnostic canon truths that were laid down by our forefathers were done mostly in symbols, the richness of symbolisms, and we teach this. In the occult tradition, it is essential that people become familiar with the role of symbolism and numbers and vibration and so on.
And Arthur Scott Jr. has been a big help when it comes to explaining vibrations and what he taught me about the colors and numbers, because I'll be honest, I heard this, and for the longest time that stuff just went over my head. I did not comprehend it. So in the small conversations, Arthur, he's really good at breaking stuff down from what he's read and what he's learned and what he's experienced, to be able to help you comprehend. I don't like using that word understand, but comprehend, so you have that breakthrough. So hold on.
One little aside, but connecting very much to what you've heard in other days here, is an interesting fact that what they call the Bible, let's say the Old Testament specifically, the 5 books of the Old Testament, the Pentateuch, are based on the Torah. They'll admit that. You ask anybody who's in the know, and they go, oh yes, of course we can accept that the Pentateuch originated with the Hebrew Torah. But what these people will die before they will admit, or tell you, is that the Torah originates from the Tarot. We haven't got time to explore this, but this is irrefutable if you do your homework and go to the reference works. In fact, it's the same word. The word is identical. But the difference is that the Bible and the Torah are communicated in words, right? Words. The Tarot communicates in symbols. And that's where the big problem is, because you can argue till the cows come home about a particular statement, because now you have a language barrier and you have an interpretation barrier. Well, look, in symbolism, red is red, a sphinx is a sphinx, there's no argument about it. But when it comes to a written terminology, that's when the blood starts flowing, and that was the intention. In ancient medieval art, all the...
And you see, I can't help but think back to, like, when he brings up those facts, I think about the Spaniards and them when they went to Mexico getting the Aztec writings. And I know the Bible was around long before that time, but I can't help but think about some of these other times when I'm reading when you're learning about what they call the Medes and the Persians and how they came up with their writing styles. All right, what were the Hebrew doing? Where were their writing styles at that time? Because the Old Testament seems to be their history book, but it's not written in their form anymore. It's from someone else that's looked at their work, and now they're piecing it together. They would like the way they would like, you know.
Way down from the earliest times, we have symbols coming out of the occult world. We're finding them in the scriptures, finding them in religion. The crucifixion of Jesus, the crucifixion of St. Peter. The entire Bible can be decoded using aesthetic principles alone.
See, but that's the New Testament, and that's what I was saying. You know, so just be aware of this, because we also have books that are mentioned in the Old Testament that are not given to us. You know, Song of Solomon. I'm not Solomon. Sorry, not Song of Solomon. What was it? First and Second Samuel and First and Second Kings keep mentioning books over and over again that we don't have, and I find that to be really interesting. You know, so I mean that statement that the first 5 books are based off of this, but what about the rest of the books? You know what I'm saying that we have? Because that's just 5 out of how many books are in the Old Testament? 80, right? Oh, sorry. Combined, if it tells us we have 80 books, but what was it, 66 or something like that is in the Old Testament? So I'm saying, like, to me, that just, like, he's got to explain that a whole lot more for it to hold water or to even start to break the ice on that, so.
Or astrotheological motifs, cosmological motifs. The image on the right, for people who do not know, is one of the cards of the tarot, the Hanged Man. Well, didn't Jesus hang on a tree? Didn't Odin, in the Scandinavian myths, hang under a tree? Didn't Buddha get enlightened under a tree? Didn't Conan the Barbarian get crucified on a tree? I mean, we're seeing this motif all over the place. And science, which has always been doing catch-up anyway to what the mystics have been saying for aeons, but finally they're doing catch-up, and that's wonderful. They've just found that, in fact, symbols are important because, as you see here, it says that there are 240,000 miles of neural threads in the human brain, enough to stretch from Earth to the moon. On every micrometer of these threads, there exists 250,000 units of information. But this data is recorded only as pictograms, only as composite images, and not as words. That's right. The universal intelligence, our phylogenetic race memory of every experience that our forefathers have had, is encoded in the brain, encoded in our DNA, in symbolism, in symbols, composite images. And today we find ourselves in a world replete with symbolism, images. We become deadened to it because it's so pervasive, in fact. We have the symbols of religion being denigrated.
And I find that interesting because the more you look into that Zoroism there that we first took a look at, their hierarchy, the one that Ahura Mazda gives the blessing to be his representation on earth. He looks an awful lot like this dude right here, hand gestures and everything.
By the corporate world. Powerful ancient symbols that we've associated with spiritual uplift are now being used for a different agenda. Jeremy Campbell, in his fine book, says one important property of language is that while its symbols may be used to bring about physical results in the real world of substance,
let me see, I was trying to make it.
They need not be used for that purpose. Symbols can be decoupled from physical reality to a greater or lesser extent. Words are not deeds, though they often lead to deeds. Symbols can be manipulated to form new statements and expressions which are only tentative, playful, figurative. Symbols are at liberty to be a little irresponsible and experimental. Now that's a very loaded comment there. In 1835, we have the historian de Tocqueville, in his review of America, and in a review of the genres that were going on of his time, wrote these words. He said, "I fear that the productions of the democratic poets may often be surcharged with immense and incoherent imagery, with exaggerated descriptions and strange creations, and that the fantastic beings of their brain may sometimes make us regret the world of reality. In 1830.